On Midway Atoll, the American military prepares to defend the island. The men are completely unaware of the presence of the U.S. carriers nearby at Point Luck.
Our flight leader got all of our crews together and told us that the Navy knew that there was the likelihood of an attack against Midway, and we were told that we were the defenders of Midway, that we couldn't expect help from any other quarter.
Night falls on Midway Atoll. Just over the horizon, a small group of American warships waits to take on the largest naval flotilla in history, with only the element of surprise on their side.
On the morning of June the 4th, we were told that this was the big day. And so in the morning it was a different feeling. We were up early. There was not the usual banter. There was more of a very solemn, very apprehensive atmosphere on the whole ship. We stayed around the ready room. There was nothing else to do but wait until they finally made contact, because they needed to have a position where the Japs were.
Japan's Midway Task Force steams toward tiny Midway Atoll. Under the command of Admiral Nagumo, the pride of the Navy, the aircraft carriers Kaga, Akagi, Soryu, and Hiryu transport the elite Air Strike Force. Many of the planes are piloted by veterans of the attack on Pearl Harbor.
The aircraft carriers that participated in the Midway operations were the best aircraft carriers in Japan, and almost all the pilots on the carriers were quite skilled. Many were old enough to have had experiences with many battles. We thought we would win the battle. Everyone thought that the war was going well for us. We thought we were going to win. The crew was very confident that we were going to win.
The Japanese launched their assault on Midway, completely unaware that the American Carrier Task Force is already in the area. They hold back over 100 planes and equip them with torpedoes in case American ships are spotted. Nagumo then sends out his reconnaissance aircraft. But for almost 20 minutes, mechanical problems hinder the takeoff of one plane. The very craft assigned to survey the area where the American carriers lie in wait. A seemingly minor delay that will have devastating consequences. American search planes from Midway have been in the air since dawn. At last, they spot the enemy carriers and report the position. A short time later, radar picks up the approaching Japanese planes. Midway Airfield springs into action. Navy, Marine, and Army aviators take to the skies to protect Midway. But their obsolete fighter planes are no match for the Premier Zeros and their pilots, the best trained in the world.
You've got to remember that most of these pilots were inexperienced kids that had come out there probably 2 weeks before. They just hadn't had enough training or anything else, and they were just lost.
As the Japanese planes approach their target, anti-aircraft guns burst into action.
We were counting on a surprise attack. But when we dropped the bombs, we were surprised that the Americans attacked us so quickly. The only thing I can think of is that they were ready for us. Otherwise, they would not have been able to shoot their machine guns like that. Their response was unbelievably quick.
But heavy anti-aircraft fire can't keep the bombs from raining down.
Everything was so intense and just unbelievable. When the first wave of bombers came over, well, I was looking right at them when they came and dropped a number of bombs, but one of them was a direct hit into the ground defense commander Benson's dugout, which was less than 150 feet from where I was at. And so I jumped up and ran over there and found Benson was dead and actually decapitated, and another sergeant was badly hurt in there in the communication headquarters. I got out of there back fast and got back to my dugout, and I stayed right there.
Fuel tanks are hit, sending vast plumes of oily smoke into the air. But few American aircraft have been caught on the ground. Despite the fierce bombing, Midway's defenders are defiant. The atoll is still under their control. As the first wave of Japanese planes head back to the carriers, their air commander assesses the damage below.
The air commander at that time thought it brought no war results. So he sent a wire message that it was necessary to attack again.
The message calling for a second bombing of Midway will delay preparations for the attack on the American Pacific Fleet once it arrives. This disruption of Yamamoto's precise and elaborate strategy will have disastrous consequences. For little do the Japanese know, the American carrier task force is already in position. On board the U.S. carriers, pilots and their crews wait for the orders to attack. To break the tension, members of Torpedo Squadron 8 share a few lighthearted moments. For these young men, many fresh out of flight school, it's a welcome distraction from the horrors that may lie ahead. Word of the bombing of Midway finally reaches the carriers. Contact reports place the Japanese fleet at the very limit of the range of the American planes. There will be minimal fuel reserves left for combat maneuvering or navigational errors.
Jimmy Thatch was lieutenant commander, and when they finally ordered us to man our aircraft, Thatch got this group of pilots together out on the flight deck, and he said, I want to get something across to you right now. Whatever happens, stick together. None of this lone wolf business. You'll get yourself killed, and you won't do any of the rest of us any good. And he said, lean out your mixture as much as you can, save all the gas you can. Well, he didn't have to really tell me that because I'd already figured this was going to be a close one.
The Hornet and Enterprise are the first to launch their aircraft. Later, the Yorktown also sends her planes aloft. The squadrons take to the skies and head toward the last reported location of their target. It is a race against time. They must find the carriers before the Japanese discover the American fleet.
And we kept flying and flying and flying, and we got out there to where they were supposed to be, and there wasn't anything there. We didn't know at the time that there was an error given on a position report.
Dangerously low on fuel, many of the American planes are forced to turn back, their mission ending in failure. Aboard the Japanese carriers, the Midway attack planes begin their return. Admiral Nagumo orders his planes to be rearmed for a second assault on Midway. The deck crews jump into action. Then Nagumo receives two unexpected messages. The delayed scouting plane finally reaches its destination and reports, "Sight what appears to be 10 enemy surface ships." Nagumo demands further information. It takes almost an hour to get a report back. Enemy is accompanied by what appears to be a carrier. It is stunning news. Yamamoto's entire strategy has been to attack Midway, provoke the American carriers to come to the rescue, and then destroy them. Nagumo realizes that the American carriers have been waiting for him all along.
The scouting plane found the enemy fleet. In spite of receiving the wire message that he found the enemy fleet, the headquarters did not utilize the information. All they could think of was the report from Midway that the second attack was necessary. They ignore the scouting plane's report. The headquarters made no move, and I think this was a grave mistake. It's unforgivable.
As Admiral Nagumo wastes precious minutes agonizing over what to do, the American carrier squadrons continue their search. Wade McCluskey is the leader of a formation of dive bombers from the Enterprise.
We'd already gone a long time, and McCluskey made a decision based on his ability as an aviator. He figured if the Japanese launched planes coming in towards Midway, then they would turn around and head back out. So he made a turn to the northwest, and it was the right turn. And to me, that was probably one of the more important decisions that was ever made. And not long after that, we saw a single ship heading in the direction we were going. It was a Japanese destroyer. Well, McCluskey reasoned he's headed back for the fleet, so we followed him.
It is the twist of fate the Americans so desperately need. Just as McCluskey had hoped, the unsuspecting destroyer leads his formation of dive bombers directly to the heart of the Japanese fleet, the 4 carriers. Unaware of the approaching American squadron, Admiral Nagumo finally decides he must forego a second assault on Midway and instead attack the American carriers. He orders the bombs on his planes to be replaced with torpedoes and armor-piercing bombs to use against ships.
There was a lot of confusion within the carrier, like lowering a torpedo and putting on a bomb, and again switching it to a torpedo.
High above, McCluskey's dive bombers move into position. Suddenly, squadrons of American torpedo planes appear on the scene. The torpedo squadrons must attack at sea level in order to drop their torpedoes. Immediately, Zero fighters hit them from all directions.
The turret gunner called out and said, "We're under attack." And then I could hear him firing his .50 caliber machine gun. And after a few minutes, I noticed that his machine gun wasn't firing anymore. And I could see that he had obviously been killed. It was just a bloody mess, really. Then shortly after that, I felt a real burning, searing sensation on my left wrist. I looked down and I could see that I'd been grazed by something, a bullet or something. Then the next thing I remembered was slumped over. My head hung down and blood was pouring off my head.